When I was in Grand Lake, I do a week where I map out the scriptures, the messages, the hymns, and a meditation for the coming year. I just map it out, and it helps us coordinate. So the music's all going the same direction as the worship, and we give this to Diana, and so it just helps the quality of everything. And I got the idea from the TV preachers. They take a whole month to map out the next year. I take a week, so I just learn from them. So it's just kind of good that way. But when I was in Grand Lake, they had a spot where we went for a couple more days as a vacation called Lemon Lodge. It's real flat, and Betty likes that because there's no hill there. And we get visitors. We get geese. And it's right next to the lake, so we get a lot of geese, and they leave gifts on the ground. And there's deer that come by there, and they leave gifts. And then to our great joy, there's a moose that lives behind the Episcopalian church there, and this moose makes visits, and the moose leaves really big gifts on the ground, really big. And we had a lot of fun, took pictures of the moose when it came to visit, and of course we stand back or by a tree. You got to be safe with the moose. And on one of the cabins there, they had a plaque, and it's so true. Life is full of choices. Now, my son Carl, as a psychologist, he talks to his kids about making good choices. Really important. Is that a good choice? He talks to his kids. And good choices. So life's full of choices. You can take off your shoes, or you could scrub the floor. So when you walk in that mess out there, you better take your shoes off, or there's a consequence. You can do some scrubbing to clean up your mess on the kitchen floor. And that's what life is choices. And there's a great philosopher, a Roman philosopher, who actually was Caesar, and Marcus Aurelius, this wonderful philosophy, a Stoic, and he said, it's not what happens to you in life that matters. It's how you react to what happens. In other words, your free choice, he's saying, is how we react to whatever comes our way, good news or bad news. And that came to my mind Monday. We had the ice storm, and I'm being kind of foolish getting out too soon. And we got a really big hill on Moonglow Road. And so you go down the hill. It's kind of tricky. The truck wasn't out there with the cinders and all. And as I'm going up, I see, oh my goodness, there's two cars off on the right. There's a car in the center. I go off to the right. Boom, I'm stuck. And the lady in the center is kind of cheerful. She says, well, I already called the wrecker. And so it was really interesting talking to the wrecker when he came. He said he pulled out 11 cars last night at that spot, and we had 4 more in the morning. And I'm kind of looking at keeping my attitude up. It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to what happens. There can be disappointments, it's how do you react. And as I get out of my car after I got pulled up into a safe spot, I was foolish. I got out, and I wasn't watching my gravity, and on black ice, boom, down I go, and I really hit the knee hard, where I got like an egg-sized bump on the knee. And again, I'm kind of looking at, do I have to get grumpy, or could I stay kind of cheerful, because I'm naturally a cheerful person? And here's the question, because I could sense during times of the snow and other times, I was tempted to get grumpy. And I could actually feel the grumpiness begin to come up, and I go, what's this? No, hello, and let it go. Because it's not worth being grumpy on the things of life. Because life happens. And there's times when we have to clean up the mess. That's all there is to it. We just clean up and move on. And so as we go through life, what helps us? What gives us light? And I want to show you something I picked up in Israel. In my pilgrimage to the Holy Land, we came to one city, and it might have been where Jesus worked as a carpenter. And it was really cool, because when the earthquake hit around the year 500 AD, nobody rebuilt that city. It was just so when they excavated it, there was nothing in the way. They could dig it all up. And it was really neat, because it would be a road. This road was donated by so-and-so. And as you walk along the stones, you could appreciate that person. And this is a copy in one of the little stores. The stores are quite small, And on the floor when you walked in there was a zodiac. And it was a Hebrew zodiac. The letters are in Hebrew. And that's a no-no, because here's the sun god with the 4 horses, and it's a no-no, but the Hebrews at that point were following the zodiac as their science. And I love the play in Julius Caesar, when Brutus is talking to another, and they're complaining how Brutus has taken away the republic, he's becoming a dictator, they got to get rid of him, and I forget if it's Brutus or the other guy saying, the fault doesn't lie in the stars. The fault doesn't lie in the zodiac. It doesn't lie in where the planets are. The fault lies not in the stars, but in ourselves, that we grovel at Caesar's feet. I really like that. And the point is this: as we believe in free will, as we believe in choices, we have the spiritual strength to make good choices, and we have the spiritual strength to watch and know where to find the light. Now, the prophet Isaiah, I just love the prophet Isaiah, and there's a wonderful section here. And as the whole book opens, hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth. Isaiah's talking to heaven and earth. For the Lord has spoken. But what's God say? Children have I reared and brought up. Who's that? The descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Israelites. Children I have reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. Ooh. Then it goes like this. And I got this from Marilyn Gluck's nativity scene. I always like to borrow 2 of hers for this demonstration. And I talk about this every year. He goes on, Isaiah says, the ox knows its master. Now when you see the medieval paintings in the Middle Ages, when they have those great, beautiful oil paintings, you know, in Luke, there's no oxen, there's no donkey, though no doubt there was a donkey for Mary to be riding. It says this, it's there when you have it, the ox and the donkey, and it's from Isaiah chapter 1. The ox knows its master. Now, if the ox is smart enough to know its master, and in the paintings, the ox looking right at us. If I'm looking at it, it's looking right at me, and it's saying, I know my master. You, Ed, know yours. So that's the reason we have the ox there in the nativity scene. And then it goes on in verse 3. The donkey knows its master's crib. You know, where to get fed. The donkey's smart enough to know where the grain is to eat, the corn, whatever it is that the donkey's eating. He knows where it is. But then God says this, my people don't know. They don't know me, and they don't understand where to get fed. That's God's complaint. And so Isaiah has, the whole book is answering this complaint that God has when he says, hear, O heaven, and hear, O earth, my people have rebelled. Now, the complaint God also has is found in Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 19. And here's the complaint. God says to the people of Israel, and also to us, you have hearts of stone. Now, what's Ed like with a stony heart? It means there's certain things that can happen in life that we just contract our hearts. We can get harder. We can get more callous. We could answer meanness with meanness. And what happened in ancient Israel was this. You know, God had taken, through Moses, the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, where they were slaves 400 years, through the wilderness, finally in the promised land. Now, in the promised land, you might have a farm, you borrow money from somebody, a drought hits, you fail. You owe me money. You can't pay? I am selling you, your kids, and your wife into slavery, and you're going to be sold in Egypt. And God's saying, I brought you out of Egypt, and you're sending people back to Egypt. That's wrong. You have stony hearts. Where's the compassion? Well, I love what Charles Dickens does, and you know the Christmas Carol so well, but I just love the story behind it. Charles Dickens was visiting Scotland, and he goes to a cemetery. And back then, if you would sell grain, sell corn, buy it from the farmers, then sell it to merchants and other people, you would have your warehouse. You were the guy that stored it. They called you a meal man, M-E-A-L. They just called it, you're the meal man. You buy from the farmers, later on you sell it to people after you store it. And he came across a stone, and the stone said, Ebenezer Lennox Scrooge. Now, Ebenezer, we talked about this before, that refers to 1 Samuel chapter 17. The Philistines, remember Goliath was with the Philistines? The Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant from the Israelites. That's really special. Now in 1 Samuel 17, the Israeli army is a victory. They get the Ark of the Covenant back. And they're so excited that they put up a monument. Now, we put up monuments in the cemeteries and other places. You know, here's a monument for our World War I veterans, World War II. You go see the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., perhaps the World War II Memorial there, the Vietnam Memorial. We have memorials. They had a memorial of a stone, and the stone was called Ebenezer, which means God is my help. And they're saying, hey, this stone reminds us God's our help. We got the Ark of the Covenant back. We're happy. So this guy's name is Ebenezer, which means God is my help, Lennox Scrooge. And it said on the tombstone, a meal man. But it must have been dirty, it must have been old. And when Dickens walked by, he thought it said, a mean man. Can you imagine putting that on the stone? Here he lies, Pastor Ed, a mean man. Hey, that would be so great. But anyway, a mean man, that gave him the idea. So he takes Ebenezer and creates that wonderful character. It's based on fiction, but it's really a true story because it talks about human nature. It talks about me and you, what we're like at times. And Scrooge, there's a reason why he has a hard heart. Remember, Marcus Aurelius says it's how you react to things, not what happens. Well, Scrooge's mom dies. His dad sends him to a private boarding school, which they had all over the place in England. At Christmas, he's the only one left at that school. All the other kids have been sent for. Dad didn't want him. And his sister says, we're going to come get you. And his sister comes with a carriage, and Scrooge is so happy. His sister remembered him and loves him, and he has to have Christmas. He's not left alone at that school by himself. And as he goes through life, later on, his sister marries, and in childbirth, as she's giving birth to Scrooge's nephew, she dies. Now, Scrooge loved the sister, and now he resents the nephew who, in his mind, caused the death of his sister. And that's understandable how people, blame God and blame others when there's a death. Anger's really quite common. So he has that. He has a fiancée, but he's getting cold feet, and the fiancée finally says to him, I release you from your promise to marry me. Because he was obligated to marry her. If you're engaged, you couldn't break it. But he broke it. She released him so he could break it. And he consumes himself in work. That's his whole life. And his heart is getting colder. His heart's getting harder. And remember, on Christmas Eve, Cratchit's really cold there in the office. And when the nephew comes by, Scrooge wants to throw him out and says, you're too poor to get married. And when people ask for money to help the poor, he says, bah, humbug. And he's just not enjoying Christmas. He's not enjoying life. And he gets a gift. Marley, his old business partner, And remember, Marley is carrying chains, and on the chains are all the bills of payment and money boxes, and he's dragging them, and it's like a punishment of bad choices. And Scrooge says, "You were a good businessman." And Marley says this, "Mankind, humankind was my business." And that's so true spiritually. And then we have the angels, angel past, angel present, angel future. And Scrooge gets converted. And what converts him? He cares about Tiny Tim. He begins to care for a crippled kid. And that compassion has changed him. And when he wakes up on Christmas morning, he's a new person. Now, when the Bible says life and light come through Jesus Christ, it means there's something about us that we get life. And Scrooge got the life. He was really happy to see life. His heart changed. Remember, he gave a goose to Cratchit's family. He goes to party with his nephew. He takes care of his nephew so he could get married financially. He did that. And he cares for Tiny Tim. In other words, but in the giving of himself, he found happiness. In the giving of himself, he found joy. And that's the point. There's a spiritual truth to the life that Jesus gives us. And the light is not in the stars, it's through Jesus. And as we become a disciple, as we choose to follow Jesus, we have these choices before us. We can choose to follow. We can choose to follow the initial instinct when I fall on the ice and tempted to get grumpy. That could be one thing. Or I could choose to still be happy. I could choose to have a full life. And when I went to the city manager's office to say what was going on in that road that we had somebody towed out, I said this: I'm not complaining. I'm just here to inform. We don't have to have an attitude when we make our thoughts and contributions. Well, there was a writer called Leo Tolstoy, a Russian writer, and he was so gifted in his writing. And remember, he gave us the parable. And it's about a cobbler, a guy who made shoes. And he had a vision that Jesus was going to visit him. And his heart was really stone cold too, because his child and his wife had died in the original story. That's how Tolstoy wrote it. And his heart was hard. But he thought, Jesus is going to visit me? And he prepared shoes for Jesus, food for Jesus, other gifts for Jesus. And remember how 3 people came by that night as he was waiting. A lost kid that he had to find to take home. A woman carrying a heavy burden that he gave a coat to and helped her with the burden. And finally, the poor guy without shoes, he gave the shoes away. And he gave the food to that person and to the woman. All the food he had for Jesus was gone. And he lays on the table and says, Jesus, you forgot to come. I was waiting for you. I had gifts for you. And remember how the answer came in his dream. 3 times I came to your friendly door. I was the child on the homeless street. I was the woman you gave to eat. I was the poor guy, the shoes, to whom you gave the shoes. And that's how it says in Matthew 25. As we wisely help, and it's so difficult to do this wisely, as we wisely help, we find it's in the giving that we find the joy. So receive the joy of Jesus, receive the joy of the angels, the joy that the choir had sung for us, and then pass that joy on, the smile, the helping hand, and the wise help, however that may be. Because Emmanuel means, as you're doing this, God is with you. That's our devotion.